Matt Damon wasn't ready for what was coming, and that alone should make you lean in. Because when a moment like this happens, it changes everything. Imagine being an actor on the verge of performing a scene that seems simple on paper, but beneath the surface, it's tangled with your own history, your own pain, your own buried vulnerabilities. Now imagine someone like Robin Williams, one of the most brilliant actors of his generation, knowing exactly how to reach past the surface and push you into a place you've never allowed anyone to go before. What would that feel like? How do you prepare for something you can't prepare for? The tension between control and surrender, between acting and being, hangs over every word, every breath. And in that fragile space, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. You sense it immediately, the weight of anticipation, the unspoken knowledge that this scene isn't just about a character, it's about the actor, the person, and the invisible threads that connect art and life. It's that moment of raw potential where curiosity meets emotional gravity that holds you captive, because you know something is about to break open and nothing will ever be the same again. The therapy scene in Good Will Hunting wasn't just another moment on the page, it carried the weight of an entire life, the hidden corners of a young man's heart, and the fragile hope of being understood. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck had poured themselves into this story, not as actors writing a character, but as young men giving voice to the parts of themselves that had gone unspoken for years. You begin to see the stakes immediately. This wasn't about delivering lines or hitting marks. It was about confronting the unarticulated grief and tension that had shaped their lives. Matt, in particular, carried the echo of expectations he couldn't meet, a father's distant approval never fully earned, and a longing for recognition that wasn't granted. Can you imagine sitting in a chair, trying to inhabit someone else's pain, while your own quietly simmers beneath the surface, waiting for a cue to erupt? That is the tension that threads through this scene, the invisible weight pressing on every word and gesture, making the ordinary act of acting feel like walking a tightrope over an emotional chasm. Ben's guidance, the careful shaping of the script, and the trust between the two friends created a foundation that was as delicate as it was powerful. It wasn't a story about genius solving problems or a clever plot twist. It was about vulnerability, authenticity, and the courage to face what we all try to hide. The audience might only see the character Will Hunting, but the actors themselves were navigating a landscape far more treacherous, the real fears, regrets, and desires of their own lives. And just when you think you understand the setup, you sense there's more beneath the surface. Robin Williams, the actor who had been celebrated for brilliance and unpredictability, was about to enter this space with his own plan, one that wouldn't be written on the page, one that would test the very limits of preparation and control. The anticipation builds not because of a dramatic reveal or flashy stunt, but because the foundation is entirely human. The fragility of trust, the intimacy of shared history, the unspoken bond between the creators and their own work. What would happen when someone else, someone with authority, wisdom, and empathy, knew exactly how to reach past the performance into the core of the actor? The story hangs in that suspended moment, a quiet tension that promises transformation. You feel the gravity because the context is real, the stakes are personal, and the journey ahead is unpredictable. Every detail, the script, the years of personal experience, the bond between Matt and Ben, sets the stage for a confrontation that isn't just cinematic, but profoundly human. You can sense the layers beneath the dialogue, the heartbeat of the story waiting to be touched, the emotional terrain carefully mapped but impossible to predict. And in that uncertainty lies the anticipation, the magnetic pull that draws you in, eager to witness what will unfold when talent, preparation, and life experience collide in a single unforgettable moment.
Matt Damon wasn't just stepping into a character, he was stepping into the echo of his own life. A life shaped by a father whose approval always felt just out of reach, and by the quiet weight of expectations he could never fully meet. That was the emotional terrain Matt faced as he approached the therapy scene. The script wasn't fiction, it was a mirror, reflecting fragments of his own story in the guise of Will Hunting. Every word on the page carried more than dialogue. It carried years of unresolved tension, silent disappointments, and a longing for understanding that had never been voiced. How do you prepare for a performance that isn't just about acting, but about confronting the truths you've spent decades avoiding? That is the contrast that makes this moment so fragile, the ordinary perception of an actor performing versus the extraordinary reality of a man facing the hidden fissures of his own life. The intimacy of the scene demanded more than memorization. It demanded vulnerability, the willingness to let something private bleed into something public, to allow the camera to witness not a character's pain, but your own. Matt had rehearsed the lines, studied the cues, and yet no preparation could fully arm him against the emotional gravity of what was about to unfold. And in that space between preparation and surrender lies curiosity, the edge of suspense. How will his personal history shape the scene? Will the buried emotions surface or stay trapped beneath the surface, invisible yet heavy? It's a question that hangs over every interaction, every pause, every exchange, because the story is no longer just about Will Hunting. It is about Matt Damon, the young man who wrote parts of himself into the script and now faces them with a vulnerability few will ever witness. There's a delicate tension in allowing your own experiences to inform art without losing yourself in it. And that tension is what draws the audience in, even if they are unaware of its depth. The relatability is subtle but profound. Anyone who has ever carried unspoken burdens understands the weight of being seen, the courage it takes to allow someone else to hold that reflection with care. And as Matt sits in that chair, lines rehearsed yet defenses rising, the emotional contrast sharpens. The actor on the outside versus the human being on the inside, the surface performance versus the private ache that gives it gravity. Every hesitation, every small inflection is informed by history, by personal loss, by hope for reconciliation that may never come. And that is the quiet power of this moment, the source of tension that makes the eventual breakthrough not just dramatic, but transformative. It is here, in the intersection of art and life, that vulnerability becomes compelling, that personal stakes elevate the story from performance to something profoundly human, inviting the audience to lean in and feel alongside him, knowing that the truth is far more fragile and remarkable than any script could dictate.
Robin Williams didn't walk into that scene blindly, and that's what separates mastery from mere talent. He spent hours not just learning lines or rehearsing cues, but understanding the man behind the character, tracing the contours of Matt Damon's history with care, attention, and an almost uncanny empathy. How do you prepare to reach past someone's performance, past the shield they wear, and touch the rawness beneath? That was the challenge he set for himself, the quiet genius that would define the moment. He spoke with Ben Affleck, listened intently as Matt's personal history unfolded, the complicated relationship with his father, the pressures of expectation, the choices that shaped life in subtle but profound ways. Every piece of information was a tool, a way to understand not just a character, but the human being behind the lines. He knew that the scripted words were a roadmap, but the destination was alive, unpredictable, and deeply human. There's suspense in that preparation, a quiet tension that asks, will Matt respond as intended, or will the carefully constructed plan falter under the weight of personal history? Robin carried the authority of experience and the confidence of intuition, knowing when to nudge and when to hold back, balancing empathy with deliberate challenge, encouraging surrender without betrayal, to push just far enough that acting would give way to being.
The open loop is palpable. The audience senses that something extraordinary is imminent, that the scene will escalate beyond expectation, that the ordinary mechanics of performance are about to collide with raw reality. The anticipation builds because the audience is attuned to the human stakes, the tension between preparation and unpredictability, the quiet question of whether personal truth will emerge or remain contained. Robin's approach is a masterclass in understanding psychology as a tool for artistry, using awareness, patience, and strategic insight to coax an authentic response without ever forcing it. What happens when a man trained to control every nuance is met with someone who knows exactly how to disarm him with empathy and precision? The tension is quiet but relentless, a slow crescendo that hints at revelation without revealing it, a promise that when the breakthrough comes, it will feel inevitable and impossible simultaneously. And it's in that deliberate preparation, that unseen layering of intention and empathy, that the true artistry emerges. Robin Williams wasn't just preparing a performance, he was orchestrating a moment of profound truth, a collision between lived experience and cinematic expression, a bridge from what is rehearsed to what is real. It's a lesson in mastery, in understanding that sometimes the most brilliant moments of art are not controlled by the script, but by insight, courage, and the willingness to meet another human being in the deepest place they rarely allow themselves to be seen. That careful preparation, invisible yet essential, sets the stage for everything that follows, and it's this deliberate, empathetic design that makes the unfolding scene unforgettable. Robin Williams approached that therapy scene with a precision few could imagine, a quiet genius hidden beneath warmth and charm. He didn't just memorize lines or plan comedic beats, he studied the man he was about to meet on set, tracing the edges of Matt Damon's life with care, curiosity, and empathy. How do you prepare to meet someone at the core of their vulnerabilities, to reach past the performance into the unspoken truths they carry? That was the challenge he set for himself, and it is here that the distinction between mastery and talent becomes clear. Robin spoke with Ben Affleck, listened intently as Matt's personal history unfolded, the complicated relationship with his father, the pressures of expectation, the choices that shaped a life in subtle but profound ways. Every piece of information was a tool, a way to understand not just a character, but the human being behind the lines. He knew that the scripted words were a roadmap, but the destination was alive, unpredictable, and deeply human. There's suspense in that preparation, a quiet tension that asks, will Matt respond as intended, or will the carefully constructed plan falter under the weight of personal history? Robin carried the authority of experience and the confidence of intuition, knowing when to nudge and when to hold back, balancing empathy with deliberate challenge, encouraging surrender without betrayal, to push just far enough that acting would give way to being. The open loop is palpable. The audience senses that something extraordinary is imminent, that the scene will escalate beyond expectation, that the ordinary mechanics of performance are about to collide with raw reality. The anticipation builds because the audience is attuned to the human stakes, the tension between preparation and unpredictability, the quiet question of whether personal truth will emerge or remain contained. Robin's approach is a masterclass in understanding psychology as a tool for artistry, using awareness, patience, and strategic insight to coax an authentic response without ever forcing it. What happens when a man trained to control every nuance is met with someone who knows exactly how to disarm him with empathy and precision? The tension is quiet but relentless, a slow crescendo that hints at revelation without revealing it, a promise that when the breakthrough comes, it will feel inevitable and impossible simultaneously. And it's in that deliberate preparation, that unseen layering of intention and empathy, that the true artistry emerges. Robin Williams wasn't just preparing a performance, he was orchestrating a moment of profound truth, a collision between lived experience and cinematic expression, a bridge from what is rehearsed to what is real. It's a lesson in mastery, in understanding that sometimes the most brilliant moments of art are not controlled by the script, but by insight, courage, and the willingness to meet another human being in the deepest place they rarely allow themselves to be seen. That careful preparation, invisible yet essential, sets the stage for everything that follows, and it's this deliberate, empathetic design that makes the unfolding scene unforgettable.
When the camera started rolling, nothing about the scene was ordinary, and every repetition of the line became a heartbeat, a pulse that carried both tension and anticipation. Robin Williams began gently, almost conversationally, delivering the words designed to reach beyond performance, and at first Matt Damon responded with control, the practiced composure of an actor used to managing every inflection, every pause. Have you ever felt the friction between expectation and reality? The subtle discomfort of knowing that something important is happening, but not yet knowing what it will demand from you? That is the pressure Matt faced, the invisible weight of personal history intersecting with cinematic craft. With each repetition, with each careful delivery, a subtle shift occurred. The lines that had been rehearsed began to tug at something deeper, the cracks in his defenses widening imperceptibly. The tension mounted not through spectacle, but through rhythm, pattern, and timing, unexpected repetition becoming a tool for revelation, the audience sensing almost instinctively that what we see is just the surface of something far more profound. How many iterations would it take for the surface to give way, for control to dissolve into authenticity, for performance to merge with vulnerability? That uncertainty is magnetic, compelling, because it is both relatable and suspenseful. We recognize the struggle to stay composed while being confronted with truths we cannot escape. And then the breakthrough begins, subtle at first, a tremor in the voice, a fleeting hesitation, a look that lingers too long and reveals more than the script allows. The emotional release builds incrementally, not in a single outburst, but through accumulation, a careful crescendo that transforms repetition into revelation. Matt's composure begins to falter, and with each iteration the audience senses the interior life of the actor bleeding into the character. The crew, holding their collective breath, becomes witnesses to something that transcends acting. The tension is shared, palpable, and contagious. Every pause, every sigh, every cracked tone adds layers to the unfolding truth, and the curiosity gap widens. Will this moment reach completion, or will it remain suspended in near perfection, just out of reach? And then it happens. Matt's restraint gives way, a surge of emotion breaking through, a release that is at once private and universal. The tears, the voice catching, the trembling, these are not embellishments. They are the manifestation of years of unspoken experience, coaxed into the light with empathy and precision. Step by step, repetition by repetition, the scene escalates from controlled performance to raw human vulnerability, creating a rhythm that is mesmerizing, intimate, and profoundly affecting. And in that escalation, we see the subtle genius of Robin Williams' approach, the patient persistence, the quiet insistence, the careful calibration that allows art to meet life, performance to meet truth, and the audience to witness the transformation in real time, suspended in tension, yet bursting with emotion. Then it happens. Matt Damon reaches a point where control no longer shields him, where the lines on the page give way to the weight of his own history, and the actor becomes entirely human. Have you ever felt a moment so profound that it bypasses thought entirely, that it dissolves the careful structures you've built around yourself? That is what unfolds here, a delicate collapse of composure into something far larger than performance. Robin Williams' repeated insistence, his patient guidance, his subtle orchestration of the emotional landscape all converge to create a space where truth is unavoidable, where vulnerability is not only allowed, but invited. Matt's voice trembles, falters, and then breaks, carrying years of unspoken longing, disappointment, and the aching need for acknowledgement. Every crack, every pause, every tear tells a story that the script could never fully capture, revealing not a character's struggle, but a man confronting the echoes of his own life. What makes this moment so extraordinary is the interplay of artistry and humanity. We witness both the culmination of expert technique and the intimate release of a private journey. The catharsis is immediate yet layered, as the audience senses the tension of a young man finally receiving the understanding and empathy he had longed for, the permission to release what he carried alone for decades. It's a rare intersection where narrative, craft, and psychology meet, and the impact is both personal and universal, reminding us that the most compelling stories are those that honor the humanity beneath the performance. There is a profound contrast here between the controlled actor executing lines and the vulnerable person exposing himself to truth, a dynamic that invites reflection. How often do we allow ourselves to confront what we have hidden, and how transformative can that confrontation be? Robin's mastery lies not in spectacle or dramatic flourish, but in timing, empathy, and an understanding that the human heart cannot be scripted. The payoff is not applause, not a clever camera angle, but a tangible shift, the quiet release of tension, the softening of expression, the visible weight lifted, however slightly, from a man who had carried it alone. And in that moment, the audience is drawn into something intimate, witnessing not a performance engineered to entertain, but a human being allowed to be seen, truly seen for the first time in years. It's a lesson in trust, courage, and the subtle power of connection, that when someone meets us with insight, care, and persistence, we can finally confront what we have avoided and emerge transformed. The scene closes, yet the impact lingers, not because of cinematic technique alone, but because real healing, real emotion, and real vulnerability were captured. And as the tears settle and the breath returns, we understand why this moment resonates, why it endures, and why it feels like something both private and universal. A reminder that the most powerful art comes not from perfection, but from truth.